I'm Kory Reeder. I'm from Nebraska. From a small town in Nebraska called Kearney. That's where I did my undergrad at University of Nebraska Kearney. I did my master's at Bowling Green State University, and now I'm in Denton, Texas, doing a PhD at the University of North Texas. Um, how I got into music, I don't really remember. I've been playing in orchestras since I was 9. My dad's a guitarist, and so there's definitely some of that in there. Get guitars around the house and I would play with them, that sort of thing. I've been playing in bands since I was a teenager, toured a lot through my undergrad. I've continued to play now as an improviser, and I direct the UNT Free Improv Ensemble here, and I'm also directing the UNT Electronics Ensemble this coming year, which is a new thing that I'm pretty excited about. But before COVID hit, I was going to start performing more and more. I do play piano in some of my pieces. I'm a string player as well, and I conduct when I need to also. But yeah, it's just kind of always been something that I've done. I'm not super great at like other things. So it's just what I do.
I think it's very funny because you're not super great at other things is what you said, but the fact is you just listed off all these things that you do, which you're
under the umbrella of like music stuff.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Is there any way that do you just sort of see this as all sort of part of this collection, or maybe you don't even see it as a collection? Is this all sort of occupying the same musical space for you?
Yeah, to me, it's really about like musical practice as a way of life. Is a Ave Maria Hubin's book that came out last year. That's great, but I think that's kind of a mantra too. Like, this is a thing that is done. It's a thing that you do. It's not like a job necessarily. It's more of a lifestyle. I think there was like an NPR This American Life story or something that talked about how like millennials are some of the first generations of people that define the difference between like your work and what you do. So even if I had like a day job or something, I think this kind of thing would still be what I do. It's what I like practice. It's what I'm into. It's not like something that I just clock out of. It's just something that I like doing all the time. So sometimes I conduct because that's the music that I need to make right now, or the music that I'm making right now. Sometimes I do electronics for the same reason. To me, it's all part of the same thing. It's just about living and doing it as like a lifestyle, not just as a composer or something like that, which like I love composing on its own too, but being able to perform and interact in that way to me is all in the same lifestyle practice, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And
I also really like doing that stuff anyway. So selfishly, I just like doing it.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about what sort of drives your music making. Like, is there any particular single goal or aesthetic or point to your making of music?
I think it depends on what I'm working on at that given time, but the overarching like umbrella that I've kind of figured out in the last like year or so, because I used to spend a lot of time thinking about like what is my artistic philosophy and like what really do I care about in the music that I'm making, which I think is all really, really important. But to go back to what I was saying about doing many different things, it falls under the umbrella that I want to do cool and interesting things with cool and interesting people, and I want to make the music that I want to listen to, whether or not that's music that's never been heard, or maybe that is like from a certain world or a certain space. I try to make just what I want to listen to, rather than thinking about, well, I'm X composer, that means I do X, Y, and Z. I think about, I'm just interested in these things, so I'm going to explore the possibilities there and then make a piece that I want to listen to. I know a few composers that really hate listening to their music. I like listening to my music. I don't have a problem with putting on a piece of mine, because I wouldn't make music that I didn't want to listen to, whatever that means. In like a lot of times my music is like really quite quiet and sparse, like meditative. I put out a CD on Edition von Deviser Records last year, which like has all of its own kind of signifiers and connotations that like I think are true and accurate about my work, but that's the music I like. That's the music I listen to. Mm-hmm. The first part of that is I want to do cool and interesting things with cool and interesting people that can step outside of like my own writing. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily have any interest in playing Yeah, I don't necessarily have any interest in writing music like Sibelius, but I love playing in orchestras, for example. I don't really write harsh noise music, but if somebody wanted to do like a free improv harsh noise set, I'm there. Like, I'm down to do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of social aspect is really, really important. This isn't something we do in a vacuum. It's a social space. It's a social practice.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to create and interact with and be part of something with people is great. I've gone to shows like, typical student recital concert where I didn't like a single piece of it, but I loved being there because you're there, you're doing it, you're part of this thing. And I think having that sort of ethos in writing and creating is really important to what I do. And then like I have my aesthetic choices too. So it's all that stuff kind of wrapped up.
Since we've been talking mostly about music, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about something that's really important to you in your life that has nothing to do with music, a non-musical interest or goal.
Non-music. Okay. Well, I read a lot and I do a lot of personal research in various artistic forms. All of this kind of funnels into music because that's what I mainly do. But I love reading about visual arts. I can look at a couple books right now that are about like visual art and film. I have Tarkovsky's Sculpting Time that I'm going to read this summer that I'm really excited about. But the thing that's really been great for me this year has been reading fiction and poetry. I think a lot of people who have been incredibly busy in academia, especially doing like a master's degree and a PhD, like I am right now, you spend a lot of your time reading academic writing and like one chapter from a book or like an article and whatever. And that's awesome. But I hadn't read like a fiction book since my early undergrad. And somebody posted on Facebook that they were reading Lord of the Rings, and I own the trilogy, and I was like, oh, I haven't read that since I was a kid. I'm gonna reread it. And I reread the whole thing, and now I'm an adult that reads academic writing all the time. So reading fiction, I can read much more quickly, much more comprehensively than I used to be able to. And like, I just enjoy reading in general a lot more than I did when I was a kid anyway. But now I've just been diving into that. I read like at least an hour every night.
Wow.
But that's also partially a mental health thing. Like, I stop looking at my phone and I read to turn my brain off.
That's fantastic.
I recommend that to everybody, especially right now. Like, stop looking at your Facebook feed and like read a book for a little bit and just chill out. It's okay.
It should be a PSA.
I think so. But with that in mind too, I started reading poetry this year. I took a poetry class with a PhD student named Matt Morton, who was fantastic and introduced me to a lot of great poetry. He also just put out a book, so a little plug for that.
Okay.
He's like a couple years older than me, so we're like friends now. But reading poetry has been awesome because when you read poetry, you can't necessarily understand the full meaning on the surface of what the words, not to, like, no pun intended, but the words themselves like don't mean what they say. Like, you can dig in, and it requires a little bit of empathy, and it requires that couple layers to really understand context, let alone the semantics and what the words are themselves, but like this whole greater thing. So taking the time to patiently read through the words of somebody else has kind of changed how I've thought about a lot of other like musical practices and like other art forms. Like, it takes that little extra step and it takes that little bit of patience. And I think that's been really, really valuable. And I've gotten a lot out of that. And I just kind of enjoy reading poetry now. But if there's like an overarching reason why I think people should do that more, it's because of that. Like, it requires that couple extra steps of empathy. I think right now that's really important. Especially, in the brave new world of 2020, I think we all need to be doing that more. And it's been great for me. And I just enjoy it artistically.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it. This was
for sure.
a good conversation.
Hopefully I didn't ramble as much as I feel like I did. So.
You did not ramble at all, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your piece at the end of the conference.
Great. Thank you very much.